I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
Nearly home. Isn't home where we all want to be? Reba here for Realtor.com, the pro's #1 most trusted app. Finding a home is like dating. You're not just looking for a place to live, you're searching for the one. That's where Realtor.com comes in. Like any good matchmaker, they know exactly where to look. With over 500,000 new real listings straight from the pros every month, you could find your perfect match today. Ranch style with a pool, barn dominium with an in-law suite? Realtor.com's got them. Modern craftsman with a big yard and a treehouse out back? Realtor.com will have you saying, yep, that's the one. No more swiping. It's time to start finding. Download the Realtor.com app today, cause you're nearly home. Make it real with Realtor.com.
Pro's #1 most trusted app based on August 2025 proprietary survey. Over 500,000 new listings every month based on average new for sale and rental listings, July 2024 to June 2025.
Hi, I'm Daniel Likis, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. From Fine to Freedom, Own Your Voice, Live Your Truth. One of her advocacy, not other than Miss Tiffanie Janowitz.
Thanks so much for having me, Daniel.
Welcome, Miss Tiffanie on Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yeah, I'm happy to introduce. Yes, absolutely. So as you're seeing there, I mentor people around owning their voice and stepping away from the concept of feeling fine and into your version of freedom. From my own personal journey is really where I came up with this concept and was able to be really in alignment with my truth. And if I can do it, I can teach others to do it. And I'm on a mission to help everybody step into their own version of freedom.
Yes, the version of freedom. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world through freedom, Miss Tiffanie.
Yes.
Thank you. And today let's talk about why fine is the most dangerous place to live. So let's start with the term itself. What does fine mean in the context? Is it a genuine state of contentment or a defensive narrative we use to avoid discomfort?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. So I actually came up with an acronym with the term FINE that really helped when we're asking someone how something is, I mean, how often is it that you say like, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. And when we really if we take a pause there and we say, and we ask ourselves like, was that a genuine answer or are we blanketing a feeling behind that? And what I have found when I've been able to really work one-on-one with people is there's typically a feeling behind when we say something is fine. And that's where I came up with this acronym. So it could be fear-based, right? It could be a term of insecurity. We could be numb or we could be exhausted. So with all of those, oftentimes what we fall back on is like, oh, it's fine. But when, to your point of when we started this, if we are settling for fine, then we're settling for contentment. And in contentment, there is no growth.
Yes, there's no growth, people. We need to have discomfort to grow.
Yes.
Miss Tiffanie, you argue fine is more dangerous than being in a clear crisis. Why is that? Does not a crisis force action, whereas a fine seems stable?
It seems stable, but when we think about when you are entering a crisis for action, you have become aware that something needs to shift. And that awareness is really that awakening piece of things, right? So when we become aware of something, then we get the choice of, are we going to do something about it? Are we going to dig a little bit deeper and find some answers for whatever may be on the other side of that fine, right? But if we're not aware of something and we're just sitting in that contentment, then that's, I think, when we start really masking things. And when we become aware of like, oh, we've been masking things for how long? How deep do we feel in this? Are we living a full life now that is painted for me? Or am I even close to being in alignment for myself and with my true voice?
Yes, definitely true voice. What are the key psychological mechanisms like the status quo bias or loss aversion or comfort zone inertia that lock people into the fine plateau?
I think a really big one that locks us into that fine plateau is not wanting to rock the boat. A lot of people who I work with one-on-one that are not living in alignment to their true selves, or like, that voice that's telling them I'm meant for more, or that little change, nudge there, is it's often easier to stay in that spot of complacency, right? To your point, but not wanting to let others down, or we're worried about what someone else may think of us, or the steps of like the outside influences rather than listening to ourselves first. And that is it's a muscle that you have to grow, right? You have to build trust in your own self to be able to step into that alignment. But I really think that, if you have a framework behind that, that's when it feels less scary. And then you start feeling empowered. And when you start feeling more empowered, then you're like, okay, I can do this. And little by little, we can work toward that end goal of alignment. Oh, I can't hear you, Daniel. It went on mute.
Yes, for sure, we can do this. So let's talk about the personal and relational costs. How does living in fine slowly atrophy our ambition and curiosity? What is the difference between true peace and passive resignation?
Great question. So I believe when we're living in that space of true peace, you can feel that radiating from somebody. I want you to take a second and like think of someone who you adore being around, and think of some of the qualities are coming from them. It's typically like joy or delight, something that is radiating. And we rarely experience feeling something like that from someone who's not living in peace and harmony with their values and what life looks like with them, And the opposite is true. We can also think of someone where if your phone rings, you're like, oh, this is going to be a long conversation, or this is going to drain my energy a little bit, and there's people of both ends for different reasons, but when you think about that, what we're talking about of that true peace, what a beautiful place to be able to live out of that and step out of that fine space. But it takes work. We've got to peel it back, and that stepping out of the fine space looks different for everybody, because everybody is willing to challenge that a little bit differently, because it is uncomfortable.
Definitely uncomfortable, but that's the time you will grow, people.
Yes.
In relationships, fine can be a silent killer. How does this dynamic manifest between partners, friends, or within families? And what are the early warning signs beyond a lack of arguing?
So the earliest signs to me is if you walk away from any interaction with family, friends, any type of relationship that you have, and you wish you would have said something differently, or you're just truly walking away not feeling like you were heard. I believe as humans, our innate need is to feel seen and heard as humans. And so if we start stifling that voice, then that is the silent killer, Daniel, because we start to subliminally build up a little bit of resentment of, man, I wish that they could have heard me say this, or
Mm.
someone was speaking on my behalf and that didn't feel true to my voice, or, and so that kind of, I think that the silent killer is what starts to put those bricks into, of when we're going back to that FINE acronym, and when we're exhausted or when we're numb, oftentimes people are numbing out when that silent killer starts to come in, because it is an exhausting process. And if you don't have the tools to start using your voice, then you start feeling lost. And again, all of these negative feelings start compounding on the effect. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts, So it's not like it has to be this one big fight that, that has to put the nail in the coffin. But to your point, it's that silent killer that it's conversation after conversation where you're walking away and you're going, I'm not being heard. I'm not able to use my voice. And it might not be the fault of the other person. It may just you need to find that power within yourself.
Mm. Find that power, people, and spread through your body.
Mhm.
We love that. So, can you share a story of someone who realized they were fine, and what was the catalyst that made that state feel unbearable or clearly dangerous?
Yeah, I will actually use myself as the example. So, um, the very one of the earlier parts of my life that I recognized this within myself. I grew up in a very dominant state and religion, and I just kind of started going with the motions. I started like, okay, what was next? Okay, we do this next, and I just started going with the flow and like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do next. And so I just started doing that. And to the point of the silent killer, I woke up one day and I was like, my life is not even my own. I don't even recognize this person I'm looking at in the mirror. And it was this point where I had to say, like, things are fine. Things are fine. Nothing's per se wrong here, but it's totally wrong with what's in my heart and what I feel like is true to me. And being able to find the courage to speak up about that while being a very young, I was 20 years old when this was happening. So this was almost 20 years ago. And in that phase of life, those are shaping years that will impact the rest of your life. And so for me to find the courage to say, okay, things are fine, but they're not. I'm so far from free. I feel trapped. And so I had to start breaking some molds and challenging some things for myself.
Miss Tiffany, how does the fine mentality affect your physical health and your daily energy? Is there a link between settling for fine or lifestyle creep or neglecting self-care?
I do think that there's an absolute connect between that. When we think of where our focus is mentally, we do feel that. It is energy. It's actually, there are studies out there that if you take two different people and one is radiating from a grateful mentality and from, a state of abundance versus someone who is functioning in a state of fear or neglect or these negative feelings. So there's some research out there that someone that is radiating from an abundant and a grateful state, their physical heart, Daniel, is radiating that energy outward by 10 feet. That is an incredible statement of our physical body does feel what our mind is processing and what we're able to digest mentally, or the story that we're telling ourselves, right? So if we are functioning in a place of fear, then that's what our narrative is also consuming in our body, and the energy that are regrowing in our cells. And we could really get deep with that, right? But I
Yes.
do believe that there is a very big connect between your mind, your body, your soul, and you have more power over that than you may realize. So what are you going to choose with that?
Yes, definitely. So for many, fine feels like a necessary survival mode in the face of overwhelm or trauma. How do we differentiate between a necessary pause for healing and life limiting plateau?
Hmm. I think every experience and every um, I think you can insert this with many different areas of life, whether it's a professional setting, whether it's a business decision, whether it is something as small as what clothes am I going to wear today, right? You get to insert this in whatever route it is in front of you. But really prioritizing like what's going to move the needle for you. And what I mean by that is if there was a circumstance that you identified in front of you, like I was mentioning, like with religion earlier, right? Religion was something that I really had to go head to head on and decide like, was this fine for me, or do I believe in this wholeheartedly? And can I get behind this? And that's when we unlock that freedom, because then I'm not second guessing anything in whatever that is. Something as big and deep as religion deserves my attention to fight through that fine feeling. Whereas something very small, like what am I going to wear today, that doesn't deserve the attention and add to your decision fatigue as a leader or, whatever roles you may play. So in my opinion, it's finding what's going to move the needle for you. If you focused on, if whatever is in front of you really made a difference to shift in your life, if you could imagine it differently, if you're sitting there identifying something that feels fine and you could imagine that turning around and feel free, what does that look like to you? And imagine it on, get really visual with this and paint the picture very deep. And if that excites and radiates your soul, that is something that deserves you to shift away from fine.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. What is the first smallest step someone can take to start questioning their fine? Is it a journal prompt, a conversation, or an audit of their time?
Ooh, time. I love that one. Time is a big one because there's a lot of things that happen subliminally when we're respecting our time. I mean, we have a finite amount of time each day, right? Everybody has
Mm,
the same 24 hours. And then how are we going to really capitalize on those minutes that we're given? If I am respecting that, like that, what time I'm given, and I'm being fiercely protective of who I share that with or the thoughts I share that with, what I entertain in front of me. There are some subliminal things that are happening. For example, something as small as if I'm committing to myself that I want to prioritize my health a little bit more. And I know that by doing that, I need to get some movement in my day. If I've told myself, okay, I want to get some movement in today, I'm going to start tomorrow with a walk, something as simple as a walk. If I fulfill on that commitment, I am shifting into a new space of trust with myself. And when you trust yourself, that's when you start finding your voice and you find the courage, and you're building up the courage. Courage is not something that we're born with. Courage is something that we build, right? And courage goes along with confidence, and those things go by those little tiny reps each day that you're able to put in. And so again, if I'm fulfilling on something that I've committed to on myself by something that, comes along with time, I'm building in that self-trust that then gives me the courage to start using my voice on something that maybe is a little bit bigger than the daily walk. Maybe if I've fulfilled on my daily walk that morning, I might perhaps have a meeting later that day that I feel good because I have fulfilled myself, right? I've I've done a commitment for myself. And so now I feel the confidence to use my voice in a meeting later on. Or you just never know the compounding effect that it has. But subliminally, we are either showing up for ourselves or we're not. And so time is a really beautiful one that you built up. I really like that one as a prompt. The other one is just taking inventory of being, really observing, what am I using my voice for? What am I shutting down? What do I wish was happening? And just taking inventory of that. And that starts the awareness pattern that we were speaking of a little bit earlier. And when we're aware, then that allows us to make some action plans to then make some shifts.
Miss Tiffany, as a mentor, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
My short-term goals is to bring awareness to as many folks as possible that are not living in alignment with themselves, that are sitting in that fine space. I want to bring awareness to them that they don't have to stay in that fine space. Every single person has the ability to break through and to step into that version of freedom. And so my short-term goals are to touch as many lives as I can on that, to just bring the awareness. And then we can start digging into the hard work, right? And my long-term goals would be to watch those folks really take the journey. And because it's short for some, it's long for others. It's continually rewriting for most, right? And so my long-term goal would be to watch folks continually rewrite and continue on the path of alignment. And as long as we're stepping into alignment and we're headed in that trajectory, I feel like I've done my job to help you.
Good luck to you goals, Miss Tiffany, and looking forward for more success. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be like you?
My biggest piece of advice would be, if something comes your way and it is not, if the answer isn't a hard yes, and what I mean by that is if it doesn't ring true to you, there's always a different route or another answer out there. So don't ever settle for something that doesn't feel true to you. Keep pushing for answers, keep pushing for more. And that's typically when you get to find that breakthrough moment for yourself.
Yes, a breakthrough indeed. So, Miss Tiffany, thank you for that advice. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
I will recommend Atomic Habits by James Clear. I think that with any transformation or any changes that we make, one of my big pieces of mentoring is infrastructure. And behind infrastructure are systems and processes. And so James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, gives such good steps for those people to curb overwhelm and to make those changes that are sustainable, that aren't just the New Year's resolutions that we're going to lose by the end of January, but they're really going to be the ones to stick. It's a beautiful book.
Yeah, sustainable for sure. Thank you for that recommended book, Miss Tiffany. So, on societal level, what are the consequences of a population that is largely fine, and how does this impact innovation, community, in our collective ability to solve big problems?
My belief in that is, if we're collectively fine, that's when we're really going to get complacent. Circling all the way back to where we started with this at the beginning of our conversation, complacency is, in my opinion, one of the worst. It's almost like a disease to me. It's something that we don't want around us, right? And if we're doing that collectively as a whole, then we're really stalling out and no progression is being made. All it takes, though, is one person to start making a snowball effect. It's very much like the flywheel effect that you feel. Once momentum starts, then it picks up faster and faster. And I do believe that when you have people that are speaking up and that are encouraging you to do the same, that's when we can start learning from one another. We can start doing that in a productive and peaceful way. And then we start making progress as a whole and as a society. And then we get bigger. So just starting to know that you get to own your voice and you can be an impact more than you realize to those around you.
So, Ms. Tiffany, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in 6th season, abstract poetry in 3rd season, and of course my book 101 review is in 6th season too, comedy 101 in its 3rd season, and my food 101 in 6th season as well, geography 101, love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 our 4th season, science 101, sex 101 3rd season, and Trivia 101, Law 101, Mental Health 101, Motivation 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and of course, Bible Verses 101 are my baby podcasts. So please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Ms. Tiffanie, ultimately, the goal is to eliminate fine entirely or to pass through the temporary resting state on a more dynamic journey. What does a healthy relationship with periods of fine look like?
I think the underlying piece of that stepping away from fine is there truth in the relationship? Is there trust and truth? And as long as that's happening, then both parties are generally functioning out of a place of respect and love. And there are times in relationships where if you truly trust one another, then the love follows. There may be times that are tough, but if you are truly trusting yourself, then you're showing up in alignment that then gets to work well with another one in relationship. And when we're able to do that with both people coming in alignment, that is a powerful relationship functioning at a high level.
Powerful indeed. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Miss Tiffanie. Thank you. Yes, so can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. If what I have shared resonates with you, I would love to connect with you. You can do that through my website, tiffanijanowitz.com, or over on Instagram, same thing at tiffany.janowitz. I hope to touch lives, and I hope to help you do the same.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Tiffanie Janowitz, because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering advocacy like this to rise. So, Miss Tiffanie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.